Okay. Yes. Okay. Tonight's shiur is always Lilu Nishmat Avi Mori Doper Meir Nuven Halevi Imi Maroti Rachel Bat Harav Michael. And tonight we have this Shabbos. We have everybody's caught up to us. We're all back in sync now with Chutz La'aretz. Everybody's reading parshat Pinchas. Parshat Pinchas, by the way, in terms of psukim, happens to be the second longest parsha in the Torah. And it contains a myriad of topics, and but the bulk of the beginning of the parsha talks about the second census, or the 40th year census, we're going to call it. And before I put up all the psukim, we're going to put up a little spreadsheet, which simply shows the difference between the two censuses. So you can see all the difference of the numbers. And I kind of, can you see the numbers from there? It's too small? Can't see the numbers? Okay, we got to make it a little bigger. Hang on a minute. Hold on, hang on. There we go. Is that big enough? Got it now, or still not? Need it bigger yet? Wait. No. That's why. How about this? Can you see numbers yet or not? Okay. I really wanted to focus just on two very quick things here. The first is the total, okay? Because we're going to see the parshat, we're going to focus. The total at the first column, of course, just lists the name and the tribe. The second column gives the number at the census that was taken at the beginning of the 40 years. So the year would be 2449, as the Jews were beginning the 40 years, what was supposed to be the second year. They're supposed to be entering Israel. The next column here, column C, is the column that tells how many were there at the census that is taken now 40 years later. And you see the difference is nominal, less than 0.5% difference. But it's still approximately the same number, 600,000 and change, small change. But if you look at the details behind each of the tribes, you will see that there is quite a swing in a number of the tribes. Particularly, the tribe of Shimon has a decrease of 37,000. The tribe of Menashe has an increase of 20,000. Binyamin also an increase of 10,000. So we see that on an individual tribal basis, there are rather significant differences. As you see, tribe of Shimon, as I said, goes down, lost almost 2/3 of their population. The tribe of Yisachar increases by 20 cents. The tribe of Menashe goes up by 63% during a period of 40 years. Now remember, this is not the total population of the tribe. This is simply the males but above the age of 20. Now we have to understand that, as we know, all of the males that were already above 20 have all died. Even though 40 years have passed, there's nobody between the ages of 60 and upward, with the exception of Kalev and Yoshua. That's it. And all the women. Now the women have, the women are all there. And all the children who were born in the desert, plus the children, those who were teenagers and under 40 years ago when they left Egypt, are all still alive. And that's who this census consists of. So the fact that the tribes had significant changes, the Parshanim try to explain some of that. But the fact that the total doesn't change means that they were at about, replacement rate, population growth. That makes sense. However, the one that seems to be most strangest is the fact that when we look at the tribe of Levi starts out at 22,000 and only grows to 23,000, only grew by 3%. Now, we would have expected the tribe of Levi to grow much more, because the tribe of Levi was not included in the decree that they were all going to die in the desert. Okay, so those are just some of the things that come out from looking at the numbers that the Parshanim are going to try to explain, and hopefully we'll get to some of them. But I want to just go through discussion of the census and all of the lessons that the Parshanim want us to learn from the way the Torah describes the census here at the end of the 40 years. So now we will go to our parsha and we will begin. Hopefully, if my everything works okay, and we get up here and we get started. Okay. Now, this is, as I said, tonight's shiur is basically about chapter 26 in Bamidbar, which, by the way, has a very interesting phenomena in the first pasuk itself. The first pasuk begins with the words "Vayihi acharei hamagefa." It was after the plague. Now we have to remember, last week's parsha ended that there was a plague. There was a plague because Bnei Yisrael strayed from Hashem. There was a plague that killed 24,000 people. And it came, the pasuk now tells of after the Magefa, after this plague ended, Hashem told Moshe he wants to count Bnei Yisrael. Again, from the age of 20 and upward, Moshe and Elazar tell the people that we're going to have to be counted. And now we begin with the count. Now, if we remember back, in Parshat Shemot, each one was counted by their tribe, by their family, by their father's house, and then they gave a list of the numbers. Here it's going to list the tribes a little bit differently, and each tribe is going to go back to the families of the ancestors who actually arrived in Egypt. Now we know when the Jews got to Egypt, we read about Parshat Vayigash, there were 70 people. Of those 70, 12 were, of course, the tribes. One was Yaakov himself. And 51 were the second generation of Yaakov. They were Yaakov's grandchildren. There were 51 of them. And we're going to see that most of them have a name, a family, are going to have a family assigned to them, to those 51 individuals. By the way, the reason we get to 70 is because there were a couple of females, and there were also 4 grandchildren who we're going to see mentioned in this week's parsha. So there were 51 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren of Yaakov who are going to have sub-tribes that are going to follow their family. And we're going to see each of them is going to get designated as we go through the parsha. So we start with the tribe of Reuven, who is called Bechor Yisrael, the firstborn of Yaakov. Now, Reuven, if we go back to, you'll notice here I've got 2 columns. One is our parsha. The other column is the psukim in Parshat Vayigash, where Bnei Yisrael were actually arriving in Egypt, the 70 souls. Now, they're not going to be exactly 70 when you count them because there are going to be a few discrepancies, but we're going to go through these and compare them. Tribe of Reuven had 4 sons, Chanoch, Palu, Chetzron, Carmi. We find 4 families of Reuven. Chanoch. Now, interestingly enough, each of the family names is preceded with a hey and follows with a yud at the end. So the family name Chanoch becomes Hachanochi. That's the name of the mishpacha. And we're going to see why we're going to explain why a hey and a yud are added to each of the names. We're going to see one exception as we go through the list also. But again, the general format is we take the name, we put a hey in front of it, a yud after it, and that becomes the family name. So we have Chanoch, Palu, Chetzron, Charmi, 4 sons of Reuven. The number, interestingly enough, Reuven, it says Elam Mishpechot HaReuveni. So Reuven, the whole tribe, gets the hey in front and the yud at the end. Also, we're only going to see that in 3 of the 12 tribes that happens. The other 9 are just going to say Elah B'nai, the name of the tribe, without putting the hey and the yud in front and at the end. Okay, now we have a digression when it lists the tribe of Reuven. We get a quick digression that tells us that one of these families was Palu. He only had 1 son, Eliav, and Eliav had 3 sons, Nemuel and Datan and Aviram. We all know what happened to Datan and Aviram. The pasuk reminds us that they were the ones who rebelled, and the earth opened up its mouth and swallowed them up. And the sons of Korach at that point in time did not die. So we get a very brief recapture of that. But the whole reason it tells us that from Palu's whole family, which is one of the 4 families of Reuven, he only had 1 son, and only one of his 3 grandsons, Nemuel, survived. So he probably had the smallest of the 4 families of Reuven, but this is just why this is listed here. Okay, we continue with Bnei Shimon. Now, Shimon, you'll notice I have some in yellow, some in green. The ones in yellow means it's exact same name. The ones in green means the name changed slightly. Now you'll notice here, Shimon has, if you count them, there are 6 sons. If you look at them, there are only 5 families. Okay, so Shimon loses a family somewhere along. That is the family of Ohad, who's listed in blue. You'll notice that there's Yemuel becomes Nimuel, Yamin is Yamin, Yachin is Yachin. Sochar, for some reason, becomes Zerach. Don't ask me why. I mean, Rashi will tell you. explain why. And then Shaul. So each of those, again, 5 of the 6 go through. Ohad seems to have disappeared. We get to the tribe of Gad. God has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sons, 7 families, 4 exactly the same, 3 slight name changes. Tzfon, Tzifyon becomes Tzfon. Etzbon, for some reason, becomes Ozni. Arodi becomes Arod. The other 4, Chagi, Shuni, Eri, Areli, stay the way they are. And we continue with the next tribe, which is Yehuda. Now, Yehuda has an interesting phenomenon when he's going down to Egypt. Lists his 2 sons who never made it to Egypt. Yehuda had 2 sons, Er and Onan, as well as 3 sons, Shelah, Peretz, and Zoch. Yehuda had 5 sons, but only 3 of them got to Egypt. And it tells us why. Vayamet Er v'Onan b'Eretz Canaan. Er and Onan died in the land of Canaan before they even left to go to Egypt. And interestingly enough, that exact phrase appears again in our parsha. B'nei Yehuda Er v'Onan. It starts with these 2 sons, Vayamet Er v'Onan b'Eretz Canaan, that they died in the land of Canaan. For whatever reason, and the Parshanim tell us, or try to tell us, that Er and Onan are really Chetzron and Chamul, are reincarnations. They are Gilgulim of Er and Onan. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But again, it's very interesting that Er and Onan, the 2 grandchildren of Yaakov who never made it to Egypt, are listed in our parsha for 400 or 210, 250 years later. Okay, the others of Yehuda, straight, Shelah, Peretz, Zorach, and 2 grandsons, Chetzron and Chamul, all get families listed after them. They were all among those who descended to Egypt. Yisachar, relatively straightforward. Tola, Puvah, Yashuv instead of Yov and Shimron. Again, Yov gets a letter added to his name, Yashuv. Medrash says that's why, by the way, one Midrash says that's why we don't pronounce the second shin in Yisachar. Yisachar is never pronounced Yisaschar. It's always Yisachar. Even though there are 2 shins in the letter, in the word, or 2 sins in Yisachar, only one of them is pronounced, one is silent. One Medrash says that's because Yov took it to become Yashuv. Okay, just a nice Medrash. Okay. Zevulun, 3 sons, 3 families, Sered, Elon, and Yachleel, straightforward. Now, we get to Yosef. Now, Yosef, we know, had 2 sons. Now, they were not among, they were among the 70, but they were already in Egypt. They were born in Egypt. So Yosef had 2 sons, and the pasuk in Vayigash tells us that they were born in Mitzrayim at Menashe and Ephraim. So we start with the sons of Yosef being Menashe and Ephraim. Now, these 2 tribes are the only 2 tribes where the sub-families of the tribes are not among the 70 people. We're going to get a whole different list of names, and these are all not listed in Parshat Vayigash because they probably weren't even born at the time. So Menashe has Machir, and Machir has Gilad. Gilad has 5 different families: Yezer, Chelek, Ma'asriel, Shechem, Shmidah, Chefer, 6 different families. And then it tells us about one of them who happened to be known as Tzlafchad, who had only daughters, no sons. And interestingly enough, it lists his 5 daughters. Machla, Noah, Chagla, Milcah, Tirza, they're listed by name. Later on in our parsha, we're going to see they're going to petition Moshe to receive their father's inheritance, that he shouldn't lose it just because he didn't have a son, that the daughters should be allowed to have it. And again, they're going to be listed by name. And then in the 3rd time, later on, at the end of Parshat Maseh, where they get married, it lists them again by name. So we see that these 5 daughters of Tzlafchad get listed in Torah not once, not twice, but 3 times, each one individually. This is the tribe of Menashe. Okay, and it's very interesting that these 5 daughters merited to get listed 3 times individually. Not a whole lot of people get mentioned individually or as a group, but each one gets their own name. It's not just listed as the daughters of Tzlafchad. Each one is mentioned individually 3 different times in the Torah. Serach is the only other female who we're going to see. We're going to get to her when we get to Asher in a minute, shortly. Okay, that's Menashe. Ephraim, again, none of Ephraim's children are listed when they go to Egypt. Ephraim has 3 different sons, Shutelach, Becher, and Tachan. One of them has enough to be split into 2 families. Shutelach splits into some who are under his name, some under Aaron. And we continue with Ephraim. Then we get to Binyamin. Now, Binyamin is the most interesting of the tribes. When we go to Egypt, Binyamin is listed as having 10 sons. Bela, Becher, Ashbel, Gera, Naaman, Echi, Rosh, Pupim, Chupim, Ard. 10 different sons. Now, we would have expected to have 10 families. That's the way it's been working. Binyamin only has 5 families that are sons, and then 2 which seem to be grandchildren. Now, we start with Bela and Ashbel, which are straight. Echi becomes Achiram, Mupim becomes Shfufam, and Chupim becomes Chufam. So 5 of them are there, but 3 of them completely disappear. Bela, Gera, and Rosh disappear, and Naaman and Ard seem to also have disappeared unless they are really these 2 sons, Vayub and Bela, Ard and Naaman, who have an Ard family and a Naaman family. So some of the Parshim are going to say that Naaman and Ard, why the grandchildren have the same name as the sons. We'll see that the Parshim are going to deal with the tribe of Binyamin and the 3 or 5 missing families. Dan is the smallest of the tribes when they go to Egypt. He only has 1 son, Hushim. Hushim becomes Shucham. When we get here, it's the Mishpachat Ashuchami. We get to Asher. Asher has Yimna, Yishva, Yishvi, Bria, 4 sons and 2 grandsons, Fever, Malkiel, and a daughter, Serach, who is listed when they go to Egypt. So Asher has all kinds of different things. Yimna, interestingly enough, you'll notice Yimna I put here in red. Yimna is the only one of the families that doesn't get a yud at the end. He's listed as Hayimna. Why is that? The Parshim say very simply, because his name starts with a yud and ends with a hey, so he didn't have to artificially add a hey at the beginning and a yud at the end, because he already had the yud and the hey in his name at the beginning and at the end. Yishva disappears. Yishvi, Bria are there. Serach is listed, and so are the 2 grandsons, Hever and Malkiel. So Asher, we move on to Naphtali, the last one. Naphtali has 4 sons, Yachzel, Guni, Yetzer, Shilem. Very simply, they stay through. And then we get to the total number, which is 601,730, which is exactly what we saw on the spreadsheet, slightly less than the 603,000 that were counted 40 years earlier. Now, why do we have this whole census? HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe, well, of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe count, that's why we have the census. But interestingly enough, Hashem then continues, Vaydaber Hashem Moshe Lemor, La'ele techalek ha'aretz v'nachala v'mispar shemot. To all of these people that have just been counted, this 601,730 people, that's who the land is going to be divided among to be inherited. And because, interestingly enough, the Parshim say, well, Serach is listed among the census, so she gets a portion. And the daughters of Tzalafat, who are mentioned by name, also are going to get a portion. That's hinted to by the fact that all of these people are going to get a portion. The 2 who are not counted, by the way, in this census are the 2 who are still alive, Yoshua and Kalev. They are going to get special portions because of their role in the Meraglim affair that is totally outside the division of the land that the parsha talks about here, where it tells us Larav Tarben Nachlato, the more they get, you get a smaller inheritance. Ish Lafi Pikudav Yutan Nachlato. According to your numbers, that's how much land you get. However, the land is to be divided by a goral. Literally, we translate as a lottery, but it's not quite a lottery. It's a system that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that works magically through HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes sure that each tribe gets the land it's supposed to get. And interestingly enough, it says al pi goral, which literally means through the mouth of the lottery, which means they put pieces of paper in a hat, they pulled them out, and the piece of paper spoke and said, okay, I was picked out by this and such a tribe, and this is the portion of land that they get. Okay, now we then go to the tribe of Levi. Separate census, just like we had before. Levi gets counted slightly differently. Again, the 3 families of Levi when they went to Egypt were Gershon, Kat, and Merari. Gershon, Kat, and Merari, we see them. But then we now go to the sub-tribes of Levi, the sub-families of Levi, even though we should have said, well, that's it. We got the 3 families. Why do we need more? But because the Levium, the 3 families of the Levium are divided into different groups for working in the Mishkan, they get a separate census where their families go to the next generation, and in some cases, a second generation. Now, again, we're going to find all sorts of interesting discrepancies. Now, as I said, in Vayigash, we don't have a list of the leaders of Levi, but in Parshat Va'era, when Moshe and Aaron are appointed to be the emissaries of Hashem to Paro, the parsha digresses to give us the genealogy of the family of the families of Levi. That's what you see now on your right-hand side of your screen. No, your left-hand side of your screen. And again, our parsha has one pasuk that talks about the families of Leviim, and they are Livni, Chevroni, Machli, Mushi, and Karchi. 5 families, and Kat has Amram. So we have 5 families listed with the Hey at the beginning, Yud at the end, and 1 family listed without it, and that's Amram, who is, of course, the father of Moshe and Aaron. But if we look at Parshat Shmot, Parshat Va'era, Sefer Shmot, we find that there are a number of families of Levium who seem to have vanished. Okay, we have Livni, shows up as Livni. Shimi has disappeared. Kahat has 2 sons, Amram, who shows up as Amram, but Yitzhar has disappeared. Chevron and Uziel. Chevron is there, Uziel has disappeared. Merari's 2 sons, Machli and Mushi, show up. They're right there. And then Yitzhar has 3 sons. Now remember, Yitzhar disappears here, down here he has 3 sons. They are Korach, Nepheg, and Zichri. Korach's family shows up. Mishpachat HaKorachi. Remember, we read above that the sons of Korach did not die, so Korach's family continues. As a matter of fact, we have in Sefer Tehillim a number of Mizmorim that are composed by none other than Bnei Korach. So the sons of Korach have survived, and he has a family, but Nepheg and Zichri have disappeared. So we have parts of 3 families of Levi that have disappeared. Shimi, Uziel, and 2/3 of Yitzhar have disappeared. We're going to see how the Parshanim deal with that. Okay? And then it tells us a little bit about Moshe and Aaron, and how Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, died, and tells us that there were 23,000 was the count of the Leviim. Now again, just like in the first census, Leviim are counted not from age 20 and up, but from the age of 1 month and up. Here too, they're counted from the age of 1 month and up, and they were not counted in the midst of Bnei Yisrael because Kilo Nitan Lahem Nachala. The only ones who are counted in the census of Bnei Yisrael are those who are getting inheritance. Levi doesn't get inheritance, although they are allotted, as we know, 48 different cities within Eretz Yisrael to live, but they don't get a tribal inheritance with fields and cities, etc. They just get 48 different cities scattered throughout the 12 tribes. This is the counting that Moshe and Elazar did, and we conclude with the final pasuk that tells us Ube'ela lo haya'ish mipikudei Moshe v'Aaron HaKohen. There was nobody left from the people who were counted 40 years ago by Moshe and Aaron that had been counted in Midbar Sinai. Why? Why was nobody left? Not because people wouldn't have enjoyed longevity, because Hashem Amar Hashem Lamot Yamutu Bamidbar. They died specifically because of the chet of the Meraglim. Plain and simply, nobody was left. Kim Kalev ben Yefuneh v'Yoshua bin Nun. And that's the whole story, as the Torah tells us, of the census that Moshe and Elazar took. Again, year 40, they're about to enter Eretz Yisrael, and we needed to have a census to know how many people were going into Eretz Yisrael. That's the purpose. Now we're going to go through and see how the Parshanim try to deal with this. So Rashi's first question is, why they have to be counted again? And he says, Mashal leroeh shenichtentu ze'evin letoch edro. He gives a comparison of Bnei Yisrael Hashem is compared to a shepherd who had wolves came into the flock and hargubehem and killed some of the sheep. Humone otam leda minyana notaro. And he now has to count them to know how many sheep are left. Plain and simple, he has to see how many got lost. This is why it connects. The counting is directly connected by Yehiach Harayam Agefa after the plague. Well, after the plague, we want to know how many were left. Davar Acher. That's one interpretation of why Hashem commands Moshe at this point in time to count Bnei Yisrael, to know how many are left, because how many have died. Some have died in this plague. Davar Acher. Another interpretation why Hashem asks Moshe to count them is when they left Egypt and they got to Har Sinai and they were given over to Moshe to be now their leader. Up till that point, he was just their emissary to power to take them out of Egypt. Now that they're out of Egypt, Hashem gives them a whole new mission to be the emissary of Hashem to Bnei Yisrael, to be the leader. Now Hashem is giving him over. He counts them at the point he's giving him over to them. Nimsa lo b'minyan. He counts them when he gives them over to Moshe to be in charge of them. Now that he's returning them to Hashem and saying, okay, Hashem, I've been the faithful shepherd of your flock for all these 40 years. Now I'm giving them back to you. I have to tell him how many I'm giving him. He has to return them with the same thing, give him a count. Now I'm going to skip for a minute from Rashi and go down to Chizkuni, if I can get to him quickly here, who gives a slightly different reason for the count. Am I? Place. Here we go. Okay. Now, why did they count? Very interesting. Okay. Here. Okay. He says very simply, as we said today, the whole reason for the count is for dividing up the land. That's why they are being counted. Everyone who is counted is now going to go into Eretz Yisrael. No matter what happens now, they're going to get to Eretz Yisrael. These are the ones the land is going to be divided by. And so it's to assuage Moshe that there's not going to be another repetition of the fate of the Meraglim, and this generation is going to get lost. They are going to get into Eretz Yisrael. So that's why Hashem tells them to count them, and he connects it to them entering Eretz Yisrael. So to assuage Moshe, because Moshe has been worried. Every time something happens, Moshe has been concerned. Oh, they're going to make a mistake, and Hashem is going to cause them not to enter Eretz Yisrael. And we're going to see that Moshe has that mindset as we go through Sefer Dvarim. That is going to be a repetitive theme of Moshe. Don't repeat the mistake your parents made. We see it next week with the Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven when they ask for the land on the east bank of the Jordan. We see it, as I said, but it becomes Moshe's number one theme in Sefer Dvarim, in his whole farewell address, is don't repeat the mistake of the generation of the Meraglim, of not wanting to, of rejecting this beautiful gift of Eretz Yisrael that Hashem has given to you. So that's the whole purpose of the counting, according to Chizkuni. Now let's go back to Rashi again. Okay, Rashi now continues with the whole concept of, as I said, why the Hey at the beginning and the Yud at the end? Why does everybody get these two letters added to their names? And Rashi explains very simply. The world, all the nations of the world were making fun of Bnei Yisrael. They said, come on. Who do these guys think that they are, that they can say that they are all belong to their tribe? What do you mean? They think that the Egyptians didn't play around with their mothers. They thought that their mothers were all perfect angels and only had relations with their fathers, and they were all can guarantee that they're related to their fathers. What do they think? Yeah, we know they're related to their mothers because obviously the mothers bore them. But who says that they're related to their fathers? If the Egyptians were able to enslave their bodies, certainly they were able to have their own way with the women. That's what Rashi says. That's what the whole world would say. Lefikach, therefore, Hitil HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shemo Alehem. Hashem assigned his name to each family to say that they had maintained their morality in Egypt. Hey mitzadeh, Yud mitzadeh, because the two letters Yud and Hey together make the name of Hashem. So he put the Hey at the front, a Yud at the end, to show that Hashem is the one who is testifying. Lamar me'id ani aleihem shehem b'nei avotem. I, Hashem, am testifying that yes, they are the children of their parents. And that's what David writes as a pasuk in Tehillim, Shiftei Ya Edut LiYisrael, that the tribes of Hashem are testimony to the purity of Israel. Hashem Hazeh, this name of Yud and Hey, Me'ir Aleim L'Shivteim, testifies about each of the tribes. Lefikach Ketiv Bechulam. Therefore, in all of them it says Hachanochi, Hapalui, the Hey at the beginning, the Yud at the end, except Aval B'Yimna Lahut Struch Lelmar. He didn't need to say it. Bish Hashem Kavu Abo Yud Barosha Hey B'Sof, because the name of Hashem, the Yud Hey, these two letters were already included in the name. So it's very clear. Okay, Rashi continues. As I said, if we go to now Rashi is going to address the families who are missing. Remember, we said that there was one tribe of Shimon who was missing. That was Ohad. There were 5 from Binyamin, and there was one from Asher? Asher is the other one who's missing. I think is missing one. Okay. Now, first he says that Zorach is Tzohar, Lashon Tzohar. Why is he called Tzohar? Because Tzohar relates to Zorach is something that shines, and Tzohar is also something that gives light. So Tzohar, the original name Tzohar becomes Zerach here in our parsha. Avo Mishpachat Ohad Batla. Mishpachat Ohad did not make it through. They got lost in the shuffle. And similarly, Chamisha Mishevet Binyamin. There were 5 families from the tribe of Binyamin who did not make it. There were 10 sons of Binyamin. He only has 5 families. The Chain Itzbon LeGad. Now, interestingly enough, here Rashi says that God was missing one, Itzbon. Later, Rashi is going to say that Itzbon changes the one who changes to Eri, to whatever he changes to. I forgot already. But here he says Itzbon LeGad, Hare Sheva Mishpachot. So Rashi is going to find now that there are 7 families missing. By the way, when we add the one from Asher, that would be 8 according to Rashi. But again, we take each bone back out because he just had a different name. So there are really 7 families missing, and the Chizkuni goes through the same thing. What are these 7 families? Why are they missing? Umatati b'Gemara Yerushalmi. Rashi finds the Gemara Yerushalmi, and Midrash says the following: Shekeshemet Aharon, when Aharon died, these talku anei hakavod, the clouds of glory that Hashem surrounded Bnei Yisrael in the merit of Aharon, left when Aaron died, just like the well leaves when Miriam dies, just like the mun leaves when Moshe dies. Okay? Canaanites came to fight with Bnei Yisrael because they thought, oh, God's protection's gone. We can now go, let's go, open season on killing Jews. Let's go kill some Jews. Didn't work quite. Jews, what happens when the Jewish people see a war? Already people are complaining, let's go back to Egypt. Right? Let's avoid war. Let's go back to Egypt. This is already 40 years later, but again, they want to go back to Egypt. They went back 8 stations in their journey. You know, in Maseh, the Torah lists 42 stations they went through. They went backwards 8 steps. Meharahar limosera. They went from Harahar to Mosera. If you count in Parshat Maseh, from Mosera to Harahar is 8 stations. And they went back. Now, how do I? Okay, so I'm going to speak to Shenemar, as the pasuk says, "Bnei Yisrael nasumi be'erot bnei Yakon Mosera." The Bnei Yisrael traveled from Be'erot bnei Yakon Mosera, b'sham meit Aaron, and that's where Aaron died. Now, that's not true because we know Harahar made. Aaron died at Harahar. Mosera at Harahar shmonim asot yesh mafreya. From Mosera to Harahar is 8 steps backwards. Why? That's what they did. They started going back to Egypt. That's exactly what Rashi and Midrash is saying, that they did. Every time they said they were going to go back to Mitzrayim, who stopped them? Moshe Rabbeinu stopped them. This time it seems that for whatever reason, at the end of 40 years, they didn't want to listen to Moshe. They started going backwards. And they went back 8 steps. And what? No, Moshe, 1 minute. No, wait a minute. They went backwards these 8 steps. Moshe sent the tribe of Levi to chase after them to bring everybody back. And there was a war. And in that war, 7 families were killed from Bnei Yisrael. 7 families were wiped out. And 4 families of Levium were wiped out. And that's why there are 7 of the Bnei Yisrael families missing, and there are 2 four families of Levi missing. Now Rashi here is a little confused. He's counted the 7 from Bnei Yisrael, but now he says from Levi there were 4. He says Mishpachat Shimi v'Ozieli, u'b'nei Yitzhar lam nimna kan ela Mishpachat HaKorchi. So he says there were 2 full families that disappeared and 1 mostly disappeared. Yitzhar mostly disappeared, and Shimi and Uziel disappeared. Now Rashi says, lo yadati mahi. I don't know what the 4th one was, because we only found 3 missing families among the Leviim. Now, later, we're going to say, well, the 4 families were the 2 families from Yitzhar plus Shimi and Uzieli. That's where we get to 4, according to one opinion. Okay, so that's where all these missing families have disappeared. Rashi's, again, also helps perhaps the fact that 4 Levium families died out would explain why we don't see a larger increase in the size of the tribe of Levi. If indeed 4 of the families of Levi were destroyed, that would explain why we don't see a significant growth in Levi, even though none of a previous generation of Levium died out. Rabbi Tanchuma says, no, that wasn't this war done, no. We know that 24,000, we just read about there was a plague, 24,000 people died. According to Rabbi Medrash Tanchuma, these 5 families were these 24,000 people that died out. Aval, however, Rashi says that doesn't really make sense. Remember, we looked at the beginning. Shimon was the tribe that went down the most. It went from 59,000 to 22,000, lost 37,000 people. According to this, Rashi says, it appears that the bulk of the vast majority, if not all, of the 24,000 who died in the plague that we just read about were all from the tribe of Shimon. That's the only way we can understand how they went from 59,000, nearly 60,000, to just barely over 20,000. But they lost, as I said, Shimon is the tribe that goes down by far the most, and that's why that's what Rashi's saying here, that has to be because no, that's Medrash Tanchuma says that the reason Shimon went down. No, I'm sorry. Rashi says that Medrash Tanchuma says that the reason that that these 5 families were killed by the Levium is what the Rashi quotes the Yerushalmi saying. Rav Tanchuma says that these 5 families died out in this plague of 24,000 people. Rashi says that doesn't seem to appear right because it appears that virtually all of these 24,000 people were from the tribe of Shimon, not the tribe of Binyamin, which lost 5 families. Okay, excuse me 1 second. Okay, Azni. Now here, remember before, Rashi says that each bone disappeared. Here he says Azni is really its bone, and I don't know why his name was changed. All right, and then he says Yashuv. Okay, let's keep going. All right. Okay. Okay, here we go. Now let's continue with. Why are they killing each other? Because they wanted to go back to Egypt. And the Levites said, no, you got to come. And so there was a war until the Levium were able to convince everybody to come back. Why are Jews killing Jews? Great question. It's not the first time in history, and unfortunately, it's not going to be the last time in history. Okay? Because they wanted to bring them back. They were not supposed to go back to Mitzrayim. That's what Moshe said. They have to continue. You got to keep going. All right. We're gonna skip the rest of the Rashis here and go to. I want to go quickly to Kleyakar to finish up here. And since I got so much here, okay. No, hafuch. It's to. Well, the point is that it's to remind the people that we have a mission, that there's a reason why. That there's a reason why we're going back. All right. Let's finish with the Kleyakar here. We can get to it. Okay. A very interesting kliyakar here in terms of this whole census here. If we can get to the beginning here. Okay. All right. Here we go. All right. Again, the reason that we have to have the census here, according to Kliyakar, is to tell us that even though the Jews just lost 24,000 people in a plague, there were still 600,000 left. The 600,000 is a very, very important number. Why? It's not a full nation unless we have 600,000 males. We have to have a minimum of 600,000 males to be called Am Yisrael. As we see, by the way, the Gemara in Brachot brings down the only time we say there's a specific bracha you make when you see 600,000 people together at the same time. I don't know how you manage to see it. You must be standing on a high mountain and be able to see everybody because it's very challenging. 600,000 people takes up a lot of space. Right, when everybody went up to Yerushalayim. But again, you have to have a vantage point where you can see them all to be able to make this bracha. That the whole reason for this sentence, according to Yakar, is to tell us that when Bnei Yisrael entered Eretz Yisrael, they had 600,000 plus males. That was a requirement. Now he's going to go into the same thing in terms of why we have these extra letters of Yud and Hey. Why did Kliyakar wants to know if we have this whole concept of Hashem putting his name on each family, why did it wait till this census? Why wasn't it at the first census? Why did it wait till now? Should have been when they left Egypt, because that's when they were. When the world said, you guys think you were your father's kids, nonsense. All right? Why now? Because there was the Jews had there was nobody who even suspected them of immorality until what caused this plague of 24,000 people? The fact that there was immorality. Now there was immorality. People know, the Jews are just like everybody else. The guys are just like everybody else. They're not special holy guys. See, right now, you see these children? They must be the same as their parents. They were fooling around. Their parents were fooling around. So too, the women were promiscuous in Egypt. They weren't so pure. So it's obvious that in Egypt, the Egyptians were also able to take whichever women they want. Therefore now, after the world suddenly suspected them. Therefore now Hashem has to put this seal of his testifying on them. Now, why specifically the name of Yud and Hey? Why didn't Hashem pick any other name? Why not Elokim, Aleph, and Lamed for El? Why specifically this name? V'chatam aleim shem Yah, ki zeh shem hu metavech bein ish leisha. Take the words ish and isha. You have a Yud in the ish, the Hey in the isha. Take out the Shem Hashem. What do you got left with? You're left with fire, Aish in each case. When you put them together, when you put Hashem into it, you've got a stable relationship. Lahorot shekulam noldu min ish v'isha shershem Hashem beinehem is to teach us that all of these 600,000 people were born from a man and a woman who had the spirit of Hashem in their midst. In other words, they were a couple. They were dedicated to each other and dedicated to Hashem. Now, if that's the case, the name of Hashem is Yud Hey. Why does it have the Hey at the beginning and the Yud? Why isn't it the Yud at the beginning and the Hey at the end? Right? Because grammatically it wouldn't work. You're right. It wouldn't work grammatically. It works better with the Hey. But why does the Hey come before the Yud? Ba lehodia kashrut hanashim. Comes to tell you the dedication and the purity of the woman. Why? Because Isha, the Hey, comes from woman. The Yud comes from the man. So that's why A, it picks this specific name of Hashem. B, the Hey is at the beginning and the Yud is end because the women were the ones who were the leaders in this role. Ube'emet, and in truth must be told, Hayu anoshim yoter gidurim me'arayot beinu anoshim. The women were much more the leaders in this moral behavior than the men. Why do we know? How do we know the women were so righteous? Because there was only one woman. There was only one instance of a woman where an Egyptian had relations with a woman, and Pasuk specifically told us about her. That all of the Jewish women were very modest. She was the only one. But the men, they weren't so high. The men, when they were told about all the laws of which relatives they couldn't marry, they started crying. And similarly, many of the men, we found sin. We had 24,000 people who died in the plague here in Shittim. To teach us that the Egyptians did not rule over, were not able to convince the women to be promiscuous with them. And another interesting thing, he quotes, when you make a seal of something and you stamp it, the letters get reversed. So if you have the Hey here and the Yud here, when you stamp the ring, the Yud comes out before the Hey. So really, even though the Hey and the Yud come backwards, when you stamp it, it comes out with the name of Hashem. The Pasuk in shiur tells us, Hashem tells Am Yisrael, place me like a seal on your heart. So we see that the Hey Yud, when it comes out backwards, you get the name of Hashem. Very interesting, Kleyakar, I thought, to end us with, to tell us that, again, what is the whole power of Am Yisrael? It's very interesting that, again, we see this whole power of the census. And again, seems very long parsha. If you're not into numbers, it's a very boring parsha, especially if you're not into names and numbers, it's even more boring parsha. But there are lots of lessons for us to learn. And I think the most important lesson, at least according to what we read in Kleyakar, we read in Rashi, most important lesson is that the strength of Am Yisrael is in our family purity, in our keeping those mitzvot that relate to our rayot. If we look in the Torah, we will find a significant portion of mitzvot are dedicated to illicit relations, forbidden relations, properly sanctifying your relations. This is a very, very important aspect of Yahadut. This is what makes us who we are, and that's how we can trace our ancestry and retain our national purity. I'm not going to say that makes us politically correct, because it probably doesn't. But the reality is that there are many, many halachot that revolve around how we use our bodies that Hashem has given us in whether we talk about eating and drinking, whether we talk about relationships, whether we talk about how we interact in society. But here we see very, very the importance that HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself causes Am Yisrael to say, yes, I testify to their purity of families, because that's very, very important. If it wasn't important, Hashem wouldn't take all this time to write it, to put it in the Torah, and to tell us about the importance of it. So I hope we are able to strengthen ourselves, strengthen all of Am Yisrael in these midot, in these mitzvot, and through that we can ultimately be zochet to, once again, be among those 600,000 who get counted, who get a portion of Eretz Yisrael when the land is once again divided. As thank you all. I open the floor for questions, comments, and feedback at this point in time. If anybody has any questions or comments. Maurice, go ahead. Okay, hold it. If you're going to read, you got to move closer so the people here can hear this. I don't have to repeat the whole thing. Okay? So the people who are on the Zoom can hear you. Come a little closer so that stand close to the mic.
At the end of parshat
Balak, yeah.
We read how many Jews were punished for the sin of Baal Peor in 2 ways. plague that killed them. Second was Moshe. Each of you should kill men.
Correct.
Each one of the judges, yeah. And there were 8 judges.
Okay.
From this, it follows that 100.
We didn't hear it. I didn't hear it.
Hold on, Jackie. I'll repeat. I guess you guys can't hear it. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
From this, it follows that 166,000 people were judges.
Okay.
A much greater loss than that. Why? Because the census was made after the plague, omitting any mention of the losses that occurred through the judges, which was several times greater.
Okay. All right. Maurice quoted Midrash that the Midrash tells us that when at the end of the plague of Balpor, at the end of the sin of Balpor, there were 2 different punishments meted out. One was a judicial punishment, as Moshe tells all of the judges that they are to kill those that were involved in either idolatry or immorality, who had proper evidentiary proper witnesses and testimony to be executed. They were supposed to be executed. And the Midrash says that each of the 88,000 judges, and how we get to 88,000 judges, if you figure out there are 600,000, and they have 600 for each 1,000. There are 6,000 for each 100. There are 12,000 for each 100, and 60,000 for each 10. So there are whatever. There are 88,000 is the number, whatever, approximately 83,000 judges, whatever the number is, and they each killed. Here, ish anashab. The pasuk says so. Each one killed was able to execute 2 people. That's a midrash. It's a nice midrash if you happen to like lots of people getting killed in plagues or keeping sinners. But the Torah itself specifically says 24,000 were killed in the plague, and that's why the Torah wants to emphasize those who were killed in the plague, not those who were killed by judicial, because again, we don't know what that number is. That midrash is 160,000. I tend to think the number is a lot less, because if you go through the laws through which are required for a judge to execute, a court to execute somebody, the laws of evidence are very, very strict. I'm not sure they were able to kill them. They were able to find witnesses and proper warning for that many people, and that's why the Torah focuses on the 24,000. Okay, so that's my answer. I'm sure other parshanim who quote that medrash have other answers. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you all for joining. Have a good rest of the week. Next week, Bezrat Hashem, we'll be back to our regular Wednesday evening, I hope. So take good care. Thank you for changing your weekly schedule to join me, and we will, as Hashem, see you